Hello everybody, and welcome back to my multi-part series where I talk about hero packs. My aim is to try to create content that will be good for newer players, players who aren't as highly invested, don't know necessarily the backwards and forwards of all of these cards. And, maybe by the time I get to the older stuff, because at this point we're about 18 months back, once I get to the stuff like pre-X-Men, maybe it will start to spark some nostalgia for long-term players who just haven't thought about some of these characters, like from waves 1, 2, and 3 in quite a while. But either way, we have moved past X-Force, and it is time to talk about the X-Men proper. And we're going to start out with Anna Marie, aka Rogue. Very well-established character. If you don't know who she is, you don't know the X-Men. A fascinating power set where when she makes contact with... in the comics, it's pretty much... and I guess kind of in this game. In the comics, it's pretty much she makes contact with a superpowered individual and takes on their powers, and in some cases, their memories. Most notably, her power set, as you know it from like the X-Men cartoons, obviously X-Men 97 was a big thing just in the last couple months, but like if you know her from her animated appearances, you know her as the mutant who can fly and has super strength, and that's all taken from Captain Marvel or Miss Marvel or whatever, Carol Danvers. She was a villain originally in the 70s. She showed up in a Avengers annual where she was part of, oh god, was it considered the Brotherhood or was it something else? I don't remember. I'll probably put it into editing, but she was part of Mystique's villain team. They go after the Avengers, or they have a confrontation with the Avengers. She steals Carol Danvers' powers, I think before the beginning of the issue, and it's kind of like you find Carol Danvers deep, like in a coma. She eventually moves to the side of the heroes, as begrudgingly as some of our more villainous friends in the community may like, but that's where a lot of what you know about Rogue through pop culture kind of comes from. And that's actually where a lot of what she does in the game kind of comes from. Although I would wager to say that within the canon of Marvel Champions, I wouldn't be surprised if they basically say, well, all those powers she has is because she's adapting as she uses her powers. Before we get into the major parts of this review, just remember that if you are somebody that loves this kind of content, go check out The Winning Hand. If you're someone that enjoys hearing about all the encounter sets and everything, go listen to Critical Encounters. It's a great podcast. And then for gameplay, we got Ray Plays Games and Solo Marvel Champion. And then just for all things think pieces, Get Up in Game. This is all long-winded to say, you know who this character is. If you don't, let me introduce you to her. We've got Anna Marie, a 3 recovery, mutant traded alter ego with the setup ability, set your touch upgrade aside, and the withdrawn forced response. After you change to this form, set touched aside. We'll get into touch in just a second. I want to try to stay focused and talk about the actual hero card before we get into much more than that. But okay, so we've got Rogue. Having even played this card a lot in the last few weeks, just to refresh my memory, I forgot she had so much text on the side. So she is a X-Men traded hero, Rogue, with 2 thwart, 2 attack, and 2 defense. She has the Skin Contact ability, which is an action attached touched to another character. You gain each of the attached character's traits until the end of the round, limit once per round. And the forced response after the player phase begins, find touch and set it aside. I think this is a really interesting ability. I think a lot of people will say that she is a fixed Valkyrie. I can sort of agree with that mentality. They're pretty good centered. Okay, looking at touched, it does harken back to, at least in function, in a card game, it does remind me an awful lot of the Death Glow from Valkyrie. Notably, this doesn't cost anything to attach to something. Rogue can just do it once per round, attach it to somebody, then it falls off, and basically you can reattach it every turn. And I do think that in terms of it returning it at the beginning of the player phase, and when you turn to Anna Marie, I do think that from a gameplay perspective, from a flavor perspective, from a lore perspective, all thumbs up. I do personally think that I do wish that Valkyrie worked a little bit more like this. I think This is different enough from what I think the Deathglow should be. In my mind, having played Valkyrie quite a lot, although I say that, and I'd say I probably still, I don't know that I've put in 24 games with Valkyrie. Maybe I have. I think that the Deathglow should come at a cost and should not be limited to once. I like the fact that the Deathglow doesn't fall off because it doesn't make the same amount of sense. But I do think that the Deathglow, which, I'm sorry, this is not a Valkyrie thing. I do think the Deathglow could be more light touched. But I do think that there's some stylistic things that I think they should be different in. All to say, we have Rogue. She gets the touched. This is like part of her suite. This is kind of where the pluses and minuses come from. So let's just talk about touched real quick. So touched is a condition, has no cost because you just put it onto something. I think the null cost is also helpful because it is an upgrade that cannot be affected by things that affect your highest or lowest cost upgrade. I have to imagine that in a caught off guard situation, this could get removed. I have not run into that, although I sort of had to put in some games with Rogue just to like make sure that I had the games in with Rogue. I liked her when I first got her, but I just haven't really had the time. The touched card itself is a condition. If touch is attached to a minion, Rogue gains overkill. If it's attached to a villain, Rogue gains retaliate 1. If it's attached to an ally, Rogue gains the aerial trait. And if it's attached to a hero, which it has to be another character. Has to be another character. So a multiplayer, you don't have another hero for this to attach to, just for frame of reference. If it's attached to a hero, she gains Stalwart, which means that she cannot be confused or stunned. I think this is an interesting card. I do agree with people that say that how this card works is a limiting factor that makes her such a better multiplayer hero. I think if you are considering it only from the perspective of the touched upgrade and that Stalwart ability, I agree. And let me just look here real quick at her other cards. So I'm just doing like a triple take here. We'll get to her cards in a little bit, but I do think the fact that you are losing a third or a quarter of the functionality of Rogue for some of her cards is a setback. I think this is, once again, I think this is perfect for Rogue, but I do think that the criticism that she doesn't work in solo as well as she does in multiplayer, I think is valid. I think she is more leaning towards a multiplayer character. I think she functions as a solo character, but I think that her true potential does come out in multiplayer. You are leaving behind, like I said, a quarter to a third of her functionality just right off the tin. But we're still going to be fair to her. We're still going to talk about Rogue in the kindest way we can. So real quick, we'll talk about her identity-specific ally, Gambit, a 3-cost ally with 2 thwart, 2 attack, X-Men traded with 3 health. Gambit enters play with 3 charge counters on him. Interrupt. When Gambit attacks, remove 1 charge counter from him. Deal 1 damage to an enemy. So I like this. It allows you to spread the damage a little bit. It allows you to take out a minion that has 1 health left without having to attack them. You do get 3 activations. Lines perfectly up with his 3 cards. I do think that he is at least a semi-valid target to get some kind of upgrade that just gives him a bump in health. I don't know that he's a sidekick ally, really. I don't think you want him to be in play for a long time because you do want to be able to reset those counters. But I do think you want to maybe give him a extra health, 1 or 2 health, just so that you can use his 2 thwart, because that is pretty nice to have. He is balanced in that way. But the ability to basically do 3 damage spread across 2 places 3 times, I would like to be able to say that in a pinch I could thwart with him and not leave a charge counter just laying there. Beyond that, I think I said this previously with Psylocke and Angel. The fact that this came out at the same time as the Gambit pack and that now this is just a wild resource is a little bit of a setback. But I think overall, he's a character that if I can just get a basic upgrade that just gives him an extra health or 2, I will attach that to him. I will gladly use that. And overall, I think he is not strongly tied to Rogue, other than the fact that he is something that you can touch and gain the aerial trait. And then there's one of our cards we'll care about if the touched is on Gambit. But overall, just fine ally. Next up, we have 3 copies. I suppose it doesn't really matter. We're going to talk about this one. Okay, so we've got 3 copies of Southern Cross, a 3-cost event, attack superpower, hero action, attack, deal 6 damage to an enemy. If Rogue has aerial, deal 2 additional damage. If she has retaliate, stun that enemy, and if she has stalwart, draw a card. So like I said, right off the bat, if you are not playing any multiplayer, you're not drawing a card. I do think that from a gameplay perspective, the fact that this can be better, can give you more card advantage multiplayer, does sort of make it a rare card. And I could be talking completely out my rear end on this one. I don't feel like there's a lot of cards, and I think maybe in the new era there might be more, but where they contextually are stronger multiplayer. Obviously, it's nice when player B can heal player A and saves player A those resources. But I think the fact that this in itself means, okay, if I'm attached to a hero, I can draw a card off this, so it's 6 damage, draw a card. I think there is some value to that, and that cards can work differently in multiplayer. It's a setback that you just know initially, the only thing that I'm getting out of this is I either attach to an ally or the villain to get one of these bonuses. Overall, I do have... God, sorry, this is going to be like just a tangent ridden episode. I do think that overall, 6 damage for 3 is okay. I know a lot of people will compare it to Swinging Web Kick. I think in terms of identity-specific cards, it is fair to judge identity-specific cards against Swinging Web Kick. I think when we look at any other card, and it's not Swinging Web Kick, and compare it, when it's not Swinging Web Kick, it's like, well, you know what? You're not playing Spider-Man. So I think that overall, this has the functionality that I'm fine with this card. Not my favorite, but I'm fine with this card. And then we have 3 copies of Goin Rogue, a 2-cost event, superpower, thwart, hero action, thwart, remove 3 threat from a scheme. If Rogue has aerial, remove 2 additional threat. If he has retaliate, confuse an enemy, and once again, stalwart, draw a card. So I do like thematically that these 2 cards basically do additional damage if you've decided to put touched onto an ally. I think that's really cool. This seems on par with a lot of other thwart cards that we've seen. I'm fine with this card. I think the option, and I also like stylistically that because you've put touched onto the villain, you can stun or confuse them. I think that is an added layer that is cool. I'm a little sad that there's not an option for if she has overkill on both of these. I suppose, 1, there's not a lot of space on the card, but 2, maybe that's just trying to come up with too many knobs to turn. Overall, I like this card. I'm happy to have it. I think it's decently cost. I think it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill meat and potatoes card, though. Then we have, and I praise Rogue for this, we have 3 copies of Superpower Adaptation. She has a lot of repeats, and I appreciate that consistency. I think consistency with a character that is a little bit more inconsistent in terms of like what she can do. I think when the cards around her are adding consistency, I think it really helps because she can do so much. But that's beside the point. We have Superpower Adaptation, a 0-cost event. Superpower. If touch is attached to a friendly character, search its owner's discard pile for an event that belongs to the same classification as that character, identity-specific, aspect, or basic. Add that event to your hand. So I know a lot of people will say that unfortunately, because she only has 1 identity-specific ally, it means that you're attaching to Gambit if you want to get back any of your Rogue cards. That is a setback. That is a knob that the designers decided that they wanted to turn for power level reasons or whatever the reasons were for that. To me, it reads as a limiting factor to not let her just recur all of her cards. Because like I just said, having a bunch of repeats means that her kit is fairly consistent. I think that is a redeeming factor, or not even a redeeming factor, that is just a positive of Rogue, is her kit is consistent. You are going to see these things besides one card. Everything else has a multiples. So that is nice. Being able to go get in an event that is basic, or is aggression, or is protection, whatever it is, I think it pushes you to in aspects that you don't normally care about allies. Like protection. I guess protection's I don't know, okay. I guess in my mind, leadership does a lot of allies. And depending on the hero, depending on your build, you may not prioritize allies a lot. But suddenly, Rogue might. She might say, I want to start with a base of 4 in-aspect allies so that I can go get my... okay, so she could have aerial on an ally. So she could conceivably play something like Pitchback or Dive Bomb. Like, to say I'm going to have aerial allies in aggression in my deck so that I can go recur these things. I think that makes Rogue work differently. Similarly, I know I've seen lists where Rogue will have a bunch of web warriors, so she'll gain the web warrior trait. She'll play out like the Great Web and all that stuff, and then she will use web warriors. I don't know if there's actual like web warrior traded events. There might be. I'm not going to slow down to think about that. This is my favorite card in the kit because it has infinite possibilities. It has limits, and you have to really think about what you're going to do to use it. But I think it is a interesting card that opens up. This feels like Rogue. This is the card that obviously Touched is what makes her function. This is the card that I feel like captures her actual power. And then we've got 2 copies of Bulletproof Belle, a 1-cost event, defense superpower. Hero interrupts defense. When an enemy with touch attached to it attacks, prevent all damage from that attack and gain a tough status card. Notably, you can use this to prevent all the damage to an ally from the touched enemy, or you can just keep Rogue safe. I think this is a great card. I like it. I like that it's cheap and it does what it needs to do. It gives you a tough status. It basically gives you like an extra turn almost. It's like, okay, so now I prevented all of your damage, but I'm also going to prevent the next attack of damage. And if that's from the villain, great. If you've got multiple allies, it's like, okay, or if you've got multiple minions in play, it's like, okay, so I blunted the villain attack, and now I'm basically going to stop one of the minion attacks. It gives her longevity. I appreciate that. And I suppose we didn't even talk about that. She has 5 hand size and 11 health. So she's got quite a bit of health for most of the X-Men. A lot of the X-Men top out at 9 and 10. So this only helps her longevity. And that's something that I appreciate. Then we've got Energy Transfer. 2-cost event, Superpower, hero action. Attach touched to a character other than Rogue and deal 2 damage to that character. Heal 2 damage from Rogue and ready her. You gain each of the attached character's traits until the end of the round. Not only does this allow you to just, double up on traits, you can get Brute and get Web Warrior, but it allows her to heal, it deals some damage, and it readies her. Obviously, I think 2 is an appropriate cost. 1 might have been pushing it, but I think for the fact of healing and readying her up, this is on par with What Doesn't Kill Me. I think it's great. I like this card. I don't have a lot to say about it. It is a way to basically move the touch somewhere else if you need to. I'm all for that, especially because you will have attacked. Maybe you've already used Overkill, and now you want to put it somewhere else because now you want to set yourself up to have Retaliate. I don't know. Or you just want to have the aerial trait by moving it over to an ally. Once again, infinite possibilities. Love this card. Not my favorite, but I think it does a lot of work for Rogue. And last card in her kit is Rogue's Jacket, a 1-cost upgrade item, so you can shopping spree for this. While touch is attached to a friendly character, Rogue gets +1 for it. While touch is attached to an enemy character, Rogue gets +1 attack. So I like that this is adaptable. You can do with it what you need. It will always be there. You will pretty much always have a bump where you need it, but it gives her a 3 in either thwarting or attacking, depending on what you need. This has been very clutch. This has been very helpful. It has helped to change the clock and make it so that I am that much closer to victory, or to give me more time on the thwarting side. Great card. I think once again, I think it's one of those cards that if it was just in play for the entire game, I would love it. Sometimes I draw it and it's just an energy resource for me, although this is cheap enough and it does enough for me that I feel like I'm incentivized to always want to get it into play if I draw it. Now, of course, maybe it's in your opening hand, you mulligan into it, and you need to use something else, but like, I will make an effort to make sure that Rogue's Jacket makes it into play at some point. Moving on, we have her obligation, Deadly Touch, give to the Anna Marie character. If touch is attached to a friendly character, deal 2 damage to that character, discard this card. If touch is not attached to a friendly character, place 2 threat on the main scheme, discard this card. So what I like about this is it never goes away. I like that you don't have any control over what it's going to do. It's very on brand for what Rogue's power is. And I like that it hurts your friends and it raises the threat if it happens to be on a minion or the villain. I also like the fact that if you just don't have it touching anything yet, it's just gonna progress the scheme. Overall, like I said, thematic, great card. There's not a lot more to say about it. Obviously, it never goes away. I think that's an important factor. But overall, I think this is exactly in line with what I would have expected Rogue's obligation to look like. Then we have Mystique, a unique minion, one scheme, 1 attack, 6 health, Brotherhood Elite, toughness, villainous. So she's just like her other one. She's going to be around for a while. After Mystique engages with you, search the encounter deck, discard pile, and set aside area for a copy of the Misled Treachery and shuffle it into your deck. Actually, you know what? We'll get into that right now. Mystique is not fun to play against. She's got toughness, she's got 6 health, she's got villainous. She's going to get an activation or 2 against you. Hopefully it's not too bad, but she's a significant minion. And we'll get into why she might make Rogue's life a little bit more difficult right now. So this encounter set comes with 3 copies of Misled. Oh boy. So Misled is a treachery shapeshifter traded. Oh, that's significant. Hadn't thought about that. When revealed, shuffle this card into your deck. This card gains Surge. Okay, so if it comes off of the encounter deck, it's just going to get shuffled into your deck. So then we have a forced response. After this card enters your hand, place 2 threat on the main scheme. You may discard this card from your hand at the end of the player phase like any other card. So obviously you kind of have to just be cool and not spoil it for yourself. But Mystique is going to come into play. She's going to engage with you, and then she's just going to set up your deck to, at some point, you will draw into placing 2 threat on the main scheme. If you're paying close attention to your deck, you're going to be able to see that you have a card with a different back coming. You just are. But the thing is, in Marvel Champions, we draw enough cards at a fast enough rate that it can be 3 down. You might not necessarily see it right away. You might see the edge of it and go, okay, I know that I'm going to draw into it. But either way, you have this looming threat of You have this looming threat of threat coming into play. And I think that is thematic. Mystique is going to show up. You're going to hit Shadow of the Past. And Mystique is just going to put you into a state of caution because she's going to get her side scheme into play, which we'll get to in a second. And she's going to be basically misleading you. Very thematic. Mystique took advantage of Rogue. This is what that encounter set is about. Missed the shapeshifter thing. That's actually important. And then her side scheme, the last card we'll talk about today, is Mystique's Manipulations. It is a side scheme, 2 threat per player. When defeated, search the encounter deck for a copy of Misled Treachery and put it into your deck. And then it has an acceleration icon. So you probably want to get rid of it. You probably want to do something. But then when you get rid of it, there's the threat that at some point you may draw into 2 more threat on the scheme, on the main scheme. If you are lucky, and you basically are in a point where you are hitting Shadow of the Past in the twilight of your game. Other than the fact, well, okay, the good news is Mystique, this version of Mystique does not make you go through her to get to the villain. That is something that the other one does. I will say, if you hit Shadow of the Past and you had to deal with Mystique, I pray for you that it is in the twilight parts of the game and you can ignore her. Because I feel like if you engage, but if you put any attention onto Mystique, it's just complicating the game. If you deal with Mystique's manipulations, it's just complicating the game. It's adding more of that tension. The fact that there are the other 3 cards in here are just more copies of Misled just makes it so that all Mystique is doing is she's just complicating the game. Once again, I think that's thematic. I just hope for all Rogue players that they don't have to deal with the Mystique encounter set for 75% of the game, because it's just not going to be fun. But there we have it. We have Rogue. I am pretty positive about her. I think that she is a really cool hero. I do think that, like I said, there is reason to say that she is a multiplayer hero. I don't think that is completely down the line, but I do think that it is fair to say that she is better multiplayer. I love the Superpower Adaptation. In solo, she's still fun, but she is a multiplayer hero. Overall, I would recommend her. I think she's, like I said, she's a great hero. I think that she's got her strong points. I think that her kit points to the fact that for a character with a lot of possibilities, her kit is consistent. You will get to see a lot of it. You don't have a lot of getting pulled in one direction or another. You get your 6 cards, and that's just what you got. Overall, I hope I will see you all next time when we talk about Gambit. But until then, have a great day.